Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football early Wednesday morning. Some really intriguing news for the Texas Longhorn fans is former Ohio State defensive lineman Hero Kanu committing to the Texas Longhorns. Now, look, on the surface, there's going to be a lot of people that look at this commitment and say, all right, he's kind of a career backup for Ohio State. Probably just going to be a depth piece for the Texas Longhorns going into 2025. Now, on the surface level, I don't think that's a bad take around this commitment. You start diving into the context a little bit more about Hero Kanu and what his career has looked like up until this point at Ohio State. There are some other intriguing factors. And then let's just start with the kind of football player he was coming out of high school. He was one of those guys that was new to the sport, came over from Germany, had a soccer background, only played 2 years of high school football before going to Ohio State. You know, the reason Hero Kanu was a top 100 national prospect coming out of the high school ranks was not that he was an elite football player as a senior in high school. It was, hey, what can he be in 2 to 3 years as a college football player, getting to know the sport a little bit more? And so on the surface, yeah, he hasn't played a ton for Ohio State during his first 3 years of his career, but we kind of knew that was going to be the case for this kid coming out of high school. He is still learning how to play the sport of football. But there were a lot of really intriguing traits that Hero Kanu brings to the table from a personal experience. I remember watching Hero Kanu in the spring games for Ohio State, always saying, hey, big number 93, there's something there. Now, he hasn't played a ton of football for Ohio State, one, because of that reason. Number two, he's played behind just some really good interior defensive linemen for Ohio State that are either in the NFL right now or going to the NFL in the next couple of months. There's some context that needs to be unpacked when you're talking about Hero Kanu. Because, yes, on the surface, this is a rotational piece on this Ohio State defensive line coming to Texas. I still think there's another year as a football player that Hero Kanu can reach. And at the very least, Texas is adding an important depth piece to this defensive line heading into 2025, where I think what Coach Sark is most concerned with is, hey, do we have enough bodies on the defensive line to be as deep as we need to be to make a college football playoff run going into the 2025 year? You get that much needed depth piece that you need from Hero Kanu, but you're also getting a guy that might give you some more upside as well. The way I look at it, this makes a ton of sense for Texas. Now, I want to get into Hero Kanu's game a little bit more, talk about what he brings to the table, and then we're going to get into the depth chart a little bit and kind of highlight why I think this is such an important get for this Texas program. Before we do, and as always, the Texas fans, that whether we're talking this team in the playoffs, talking this team in the transfer portal, it's been very fun to talk this team. It's no secret that I'm extremely high on this football team heading into the 2025 year. The amount of support y'all have shown the boys means the world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into this one. Let's start again with Hero Kanu as a football player. Like, most notably for me, the way he was talked about by Ohio State fans when he left Ohio State, there was a lot of optimism that he could be a really important piece on the defensive line for Ohio State going into 2025. Number two, whenever you see this kid in the spring game, and again, he hasn't got a ton of opportunity to play on Saturdays because he's been behind a lot of good defensive linemen who have played a lot of football for Ohio State over the last couple of years. There's some flashes. And that blend of I'm 6'5", 310 with some really, really good athleticism, probably stemming from that soccer background that he had growing up in Germany. You want to bet on these kind of guys. And I think that was Ohio State's thought process taking him out of high school. Is, hey, we know he's not going to be a huge contributor during his first couple of years with this program. And we got to get a little bit more weight on him. We got to teach him how to be a better football. We got a really good athlete. Got to make him a good football player. He has gotten better as a football player as the years have gone on. Now, Texas, comes in and has the opportunity to almost benefit from the ceiling that Hero Kanu brings to the table. And so I think this makes a lot of sense where, yeah, you're getting a guy that could be a high upside football player for Texas in 2025. But I think just as importantly, you're talking about depth, right? And this was clearly a position that Texas wanted to address in the transfer portal. You go out and land a guy like Claude Brevard, guy that's played a ton of football in the Big Ten. You know is going to be a plug-and-play guy that gives you a lot of meaningful snaps in 2025. Probably not the dominant force that we've seen prior interior defensive linemen for Texas over the last couple of years. Guys like T'Vondre Sweat, guys like Byron Murphy, dang good football player. Travis Shaw, another guy that he is certainly giving you depth, but he's a former 5-star. Like, we know there's another gear for him as well. I look at the 3 additions that Texas brought in, and what it looks like to me is, hey, we're taking a little pressure off a guy like Justice Terry. There's a very good chance that Justice Terry year one has a massive impact on this Texas defensive line. In fact, that would be my prediction I have for this Texas defensive line heading into 2025. Adding a guy like Hero Kanu takes a little pressure off Justice Terry in terms of, does he need to be ready immediately? You know, maybe it takes 6 to 8 weeks in that freshman year for Justice Terry for it to really click. Well, it's not a disaster if that's the case when you bring in a guy like Hero Kanu. Now, if Texas reaches their ceiling on defense, Justice Terry is probably a difference maker for Texas in the 2025 year. We talk about this all the time on the defensive line. You're really only as good as your depth. So you've seen defensive lines have really, really good football players, but not deep around that good football player, and it doesn't really matter. You got to make sure you have these big bodies and you're rotating these big bodies in and out through 4 quarters of a football game, 12 plus games of a season. I always go back to Michigan in 2023. I go back to Texas in 2023 as well. Go back to the Georgia teams that we saw in 2021 and 2022. Yeah, they had really good football players. What made Texas' defensive line so special in 2023? Yeah, we started out with guys like Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat. Well, we had Alfred Collins kind of rotating in and being a guy that didn't have to play 50, 60 snaps a game. You could keep him fresh for 4 quarters. That's how Texas dominates the defensive line. Depth is important. And so, yeah, on the surface, Hero Kanu may be just a depth piece for Texas in 2025. If that's all he is for Texas, this is still a really big pickup. And then if you get some of that upside that we're kind of expecting from this kid in 2025, it's an even better pickup. It kind of goes back to what we talk about all the time with Texas. I love how they operate in the transfer portal. They don't go out to the transfer portal and just get players to get players. They look at their roster and say, hey, where are the positions that maybe we have a few cracks in our roster heading into a season? Those are the positions that we're going to target. We ain't going to bring in 20 guys every single year because we recruit the high school ranks just about as good as anybody in the country. We don't need to, and it's hard for us to add that many names in the transfer portal with how good we recruit the high school ranks. Those specific positions that you want to immediately address, that's what Texas focuses on. You look at an addition like Andrew Makuba. You know, we were missing maybe that veteran safety, that difference maker in the second, third level of a defense. What did Andrew Makuba completely changed how we saw this Texas defense in 2024? The targeted approach continues to be really impressive for Coach Sark and this Texas team, and Hero Kanu, another example of that. Now, I think what Texas is probably looking to do is, hey, let's go into spring practice with what we have on the inside of the defensive line, evaluate where Justice Terry is, evaluate where Alex January is going into year 2, another guy that flashed as a freshman. Say, hey, maybe we need to go out and add one more. Maybe we're just good with what we have right now. But I think Hero Kanu, from not only a depth standpoint, but betting on a little bit of upside, makes a lot of sense for Texas. We will close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.